hello, and welcome to the Dave Cast on this Saturday. Hope you're doing well. So glad that you joined us. Want to first of all remind you about the worship services tomorrow at Conyers First. We are having an in-person service. It's outside, but you're welcome to come and park your car and listen on a low-frequency FM station, or you can bring your lawn chairs and sit out socially distanced. And so we would love to have you there. If that fits for you, if you are high risk, or if you haven't been feeling well lately, or just have any concerns at all, just plan on staying home, and you can join us at 11 o'clock for our online worship service, both on YouTube and Facebook. And so whichever one you choose, or both of them, we love to have you. It's going to be a great day at worship at Conyers First tomorrow. Also want to remind you that next Tuesday and Thursday on the Dave Cast, I'll be continuing the teaching series on Exodus. We have finally made it out of the case laws, and we're going to be moving into a section that talks about the tabernacle, and it's very fascinating. I'm really, really looking forward to teaching that. So that's next Tuesday and Thursday. Hope you'll join us for that. On today's episode, we have a very, very special treat. We have with us Jordan and Charlie Flock, who are missionaries in Lebanon. I sat down with them earlier today and did an interview with them, and they're just doing incredible work. Jordan, of course, grew up in Conyers First, and we're just so proud of all that they're doing. So I think you will find it inspiring, and so we're going to transition to that. But if you'll wait around to the very end, I have some closing things to say there too. So let's now transition to the interview. So how long you guys been married now?
Just over 3 years.
Yeah.
December, 3 years. I can't believe it's been 3 years.
Yeah.
It seems surreal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You were a senior when I got here 7 years ago, I
I
think.
think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Like going into my senior year.
Senior
which is
year.
Crazy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, you know, you always knew God had big things in store for Jordan, and so went out to Dallas to mission school,
Yeah.
and y'all met.
Yes.
Yep.
Can you remember the first time you guys met? What that was like?
We met in the cafeteria at lunch.
Yeah.
So,
And
super romantic.
Very romantic.
Across the lunch table, yeah.
Very romantic.
I think we bonded over our love for Middle Eastern food. So that was
All
pretty
right, so
fun.
that might answer some questions I had.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you guys have been married and you're in ministry together, and so you're in Lebanon, which, you know, you hear people going in the mission field. That's the first one that's come up over my years of. So, what called you to Lebanon besides maybe Middle Eastern food?
Yeah, you know, right when I graduated high school, I spent a year in Lebanon.
Okay.
It was through a connection that we had through a mutual friend. We knew a pastor there, so so that's how I got introduced to the country. Was you know, living there for a year.
Yeah.
And you know, when we were going through Bible school, the Lord just started giving me dreams about Lebanon again, because I never thought, when I came back from my year, I never thought I'd go back to the country again. I thought it was just, you know, a year, a cool experience. But the Lord really started stirring my heart for this country again. And so we started talking about it right after we got engaged. And she said, go ahead.
Yeah. I was like, you know, I knew this was really on his heart, and, you know, we're preparing for marriage. So I was like, okay, Lord, you know, you're speaking to him about this, and I need a word to hold on to if this is what we're going to be walking into, so that I know in the good times and maybe in the tough times, like, you have us here and you've really called us here. So it was really wild. I never have dreams, but that night I was like, okay, Lord, I want a dream. Charlie has a dream. You never speak to me in dreams, so I want that. And that night the Lord gave me a very clear dream just about his heart for that
That's
region.
awesome.
And it was just really neat for him to meet me in that place. But I knew from that moment on, without a doubt, like, he was calling us to that area and what he had for us there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, so how many years have y'all been there now?
May was our 1 year mark,
Okay.
so just over a year.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, so tell me about your ministry there. What have y'all been doing? I know you're connected with the church, but what you've been doing, and you know,
Yeah, so
maybe some stories about that.
So we've connected with the church in the south. It's called Holy Spirit Church. They actually have two locations. You know, the main location's in Beirut, and then our church is a few hours south. And the main heart is to be a light in the South, and the way that we feel called to minister is through worship and prayer. And so that's what we've been mostly involved in is, I'll lead worship a couple times a week. And our main heart is to be able to gather people into an environment of worship and prayer where people can come and encounter the Lord. The church also has other forms of ministry. There's a school that they have for the refugee children that's really awesome. And
I know that you've got great gifts in worship leadership, so that seems like it. Now, do you lead? What language is it?
Arabic.
Arabic. So do you lead worship in Arabic? Or
I do my best.
I'm going to brag on him. He's very good.
Yeah.
He's definitely grown so much throughout this past year. Our pastor also leads worship. So it's been fun to see him kind of help Charlie with this. But yeah, I mean, I would say you're getting a lot more comfortable leading by yourself and doing that in Arabic, which is pretty cool.
And so like in Spanish, vowels are pure, so it's easier. If there been some adjustment in the language with you guys?
Arabic is considered the second hardest language in the world.
Behind Mandarin.
Behind Mandarin. Yeah. So it's a very complicated language. Your verbs and nouns and everything they change depending on tense and gender and all this crazy stuff. So it's a very complicated language. Yeah. But we've, I think we spent 9 months of tutoring.
Yeah.
And so it's gotten to a point where like it's easy to sit through something and start to understand and really be aware of what's going on around us. So we've seen a lot of breakthrough in the language, and it's a beautiful, beautiful language.
And so, and you're immersed in it now. And I've heard y'all were killing it. But, I heard y'all were killing it with language. You had a gift for languages. And, of course, that was Tony, so she might have been.
She might have bragging a little bit.
So, so you were called there. What is the population there? What is the religious makeup of Lebanon?
So it's about 1/3 Christian Maronite. It's the majority of the Christian population there is Maronite or Eastern Orthodox,
right? And
then 1/3 Shia Muslim and a Shia Sunni.
Okay,
that's a very rough estimate, but generally that's how we describe the country, is that it's 1/3 Christian, 1/3 Sunni, 1/3 Shia.
And you have about 6 million people, give or take. It's a little fuzzy on the numbers just because we did have a lot of Syrian refugees come in undocumented a few years ago when they had their big war, and a lot of them had to flee. So, but roughly that's how many people are in
I'm
the
teaching
country.
this thing on Exodus, and I got into this section where it's talking about welcoming the stranger, welcome the foreign. And so I was reading about refugees and Syrian refugees. I mean, there's I think I got 12.7 million Syrian refugees because of their war and stuff. So Lebanon had a civil war, it's in my memory. You guys may know, but how was that settled out?
Yeah, so the Civil War was back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And
before y'all were born.
Yeah, before we were born. But it's crazy.
I remember it well. It was a lot in the news. So
yeah. A lot of people we talk to when they hear Beirut, they're like, "Oh my gosh!" Because it really was a war zone.
Yeah.
I mean, a couple decades ago. And it's so sad to see because we still see the effects of the Civil War. It seems for us, it seems so long ago because it was before we were born, but we still see the effects now. The country hasn't recovered yet. There's still some animosity between certain groups. There's still separation. If you drive through a neighborhood, it's very quick. You're able to tell, okay, this is a Christian neighborhood. This is Shia. This is Sunni. There's still that segregation between religious sects. They don't like to mix. The country hasn't restored their 24/7 electricity yet. We have rolling blackouts. So power will cut for about half the day.
So living there, and I think this is a question with how you approach witnessing to people. If you go to New York, those neighborhoods, you can know when you're in a Chinese neighborhood or German or and so there's a cultural identity, and then there's sort of this slippery slope nationalism that gets into kind of racial things. Is that still play into it? I mean, how do you to let people the cultural identity? I mean, whatever that background's important to folks, but it can get on this sort of place where racism, where like we're demonizing other people groups just based on ethnic heritage.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
There's definitely some of that. There's just a lot of hurt from the war. You know, we heard a story recently of it was a Christian woman in Beirut, and I think it was her father and her brothers were killed in the war, and they knew the man that did it.
Oh gosh.
And he just lives right down the street.
Yeah.
And so there's all this hate and anger just built up for decades, and it just never went away. And, you know, so you hear about this a lot, where there's hurt from the war, and that manifests in different ways. It might look like, you know, racism or prejudice, but a lot of it's hurt, and it just needs to be dealt with. And it's actually a really amazing story with this woman. She shared it at one of our services, where she wanted to forgive the man. She found out he was dying of, I think, it might have been cancer, it might have been something different, but he was on his deathbed pretty much. And she called his wife and was like, I want him to know that I forgave him. And she said it just broke him, and it was like, it released her as well, because she's not carrying that weight of anger and bitterness anymore. And so we're starting to hear these stories, and that's what we believe the country needs, is there needs to be reconciliation and forgiveness.
Right.
That a lot of them really only have the ability to come to that and come to those terms with the Lord. You know, this woman found the Lord and then was able to minister to this man who was dying. But I think there's a lot of hurt and a lot of just trauma that's been stuffed down, but we're starting to see the Lord heal some of that and break down those barriers. But there's still a lot that has to be done within the country. For sure.
Yeah, forgiveness is such a gift. To the giver and the receiver.
Yeah, it really is.
It's one thing I want to make sure that I ask you about, because some people were here Sunday and they heard and just all the assumptions that we make, you know, that somehow Habzallah is, you know, been a terrorist act or something, you know. I probably shouldn't have said that, but anyway. But you know, it now just seems like it was just negligence for the explosion. But just tell us what y'all said on Sunday, because I know people were interested in that, because that's really been in the news.
Yeah, you know, we're talking about the explosion that happened this August 4th.
I think so.
Was it? Yeah. You know, the story of Lebanon, of kind of this whole situation that we're seeing right now. I mean, it goes back to the Civil War, you know, because the way the government was set up, and so there's been a lot of corruption in the government for decades. There's, you know, the same politicians are still in office, you know, and so there's a lot of corruption that we see within the government, and we started seeing it very visibly back in October. There was a popular movement within the country, and they called it Saura, or revolution. And you know, they took to the streets. They were on the streets until the spring. It was months and months of protests, and I mean, the city square, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people. You had mothers and daughters, fathers and sons, and everyone was crying out for their country. And it was really amazing, because we were just talking about, you know, the segregation within the country. And there's a lot of parties within the country. You know, they all have their flag. When we drive south, we see the flags of certain parties. And during this revolution, for the most part, it was all the Lebanese flag. Wow. And you know, the people were like, this is who we are Lebanese, and we want our lives back. And what they're crying out against was government incompetence and corruption. You know, they're crying out against what their government was doing. And so seeing this explosion was just amplifies that hurt that people are feeling. Because it was so the explosion was about 2,700 tons of ammonium nitrate, which compared to the Oklahoma bombing was 2 tons.
Yeah.
So this is an insane amount of explosives.
The pictures from that are just, you know,
it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. It's the third largest explosion in human history. That's next to
the two,
Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Like, it's an insanely large explosion, and you know, at first there were some questions like, was this an attack? Was it negligence? And it's like, well, it's negligence, but they left 3,000 tons of ammonium nitrate next to a densely populated neighborhood. We've been to this neighborhood.
2014.
It's been there for 6 years. We've been to this neighborhood. One of our favorite date spots. It was a great
it's like
restaurant.
One block in on the
a couple blocks
area.
away. Like if we would have been there, like we might not be here. It's so sad to see, all the destruction, and so I understand the anger of the people. I understand the hurt, because it was like it just seemed like it couldn't get worse. I was talking to a friend, and it was like, it can't get worse than this, so it can only get better. And then it's heartbreaking to see this happen.
Yeah, I think you said on Sunday that it was already the worst year of and then that happened.
And that's coming from the mouths of people that lived through the Civil War,
the war in 2006,
the 2006 Israeli War, the Syrian occupation. These are people that have seen it all, that lived through so much, and they're like, this is the worst year Lebanon has ever seen.
The COVID, how was that, and how the country handled it, and what was that?
I would say the lockdown was pretty strict, especially in the beginning. We kind of started a little bit before everyone else, just because they were really worried about the healthcare system being able to keep up with everything, which thankfully they haven't been too overwhelmed. But yeah, we just started with a pretty strict military lockdown. We had some helicopters flying overhead, reminding everybody to stay at home, and so that was kind of intense. But yeah, it was just a few months of not quite knowing what we were able to do, what the rules were, so everyone pretty much had to stay home. Unless they were going grocery shopping, and that was about it.
I don't know that Americans quite get that we really weren't on lockdown. We were sheltering in place. It really wasn't what other countries had.
Like there was checkpoints regularly. We couldn't drive between cities. We could only drive on certain days depending on what our car tag ended in. So it was rather intense.
We had nightly curfew.
Couldn't go on walks outside. So we had to get creative to not go stir crazy. But thankfully they were able to lift that over the summer, and they're still being precautious with everything. But
well, I know that y'all are both risk takers and faith-filled people and of that. But how do you feel safe? How do you feel you're accepted there as Americans and
we generally don't get pegged as Americans.
Because
they don't expect Americans to be in the South. Their first guess is normally European or Italian, French, and I'll just kind of roll with it. I tell people I'm from Texas because that somehow goes over better than America sometimes.
Yeah, if you were from Paris, Texas, then you could say you're from Paris.
Right. Fortunately, we're not, but we could say we're from Georgia. That's the old European country. Yeah. No, but generally the attitude of the person we meet on the streets, they actually have a very good view of America. I'll be working out in the gym and somebody comes up and I tell them where I'm from, like, oh yay, Las Vegas or something.
Just one random city.
Have one
city.
Like,
it's the best city in America.
Ohio. I want to go to Ohio. I'm like, okay, cool, awesome. And so there's a lot of people that have a relative here, so they actually have a very good view of America. Most people want to move to America, so they don't really see us as the enemy.
There's a ton of foreigners within Lebanon anyway, so they're used to meeting people from other countries, and there's actually more Lebanese outside of Lebanon than within Lebanon. So you have a lot of family.
Was that because of displacement of the Civil War, or what?
Kind of. People have just slowly been leaving for years just because of hardship and better opportunities outside the country, sadly.
But a large portion of that was the Civil War. That was when like the mass exodus was.
There's probably going to be another one with everything having happened recently.
So how has the reception been as your church? I mean, I think in just our 3-minute conversation Sunday, you said the church was growing, and I think particularly since, but how has the reception to the gospel been? And what have been some obstacles to that, and how have you overcome them? What's your main experience with that?
Our church group down in Tyre is beautiful. Most of the congregation right now are Syrian, so they're refugees from Syria, and we have some Lebanese as well that have gotten much more interested, especially throughout the revolution and the crisis. But the Syrian believers, it was we're after being there for a couple months, there was a baptism, and it was, I think, 14 people. It was like 4 families that were all getting baptized, with Muslim background, and it was one of the most beautiful things to witness. And then to see them, so strong in their faith afterwards. They're fresh believers. And their faith challenges me because they're so on fire for the Lord. That's all they know. And they really, truly are in love with Jesus. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to see.
Yeah.
That's super.
Yeah, it's definitely been great. I think a lot of people are able to get involved with the church, mainly from them slowly talking to their neighbors and their friends and things like that. And then it's mainly through relationships where many times we see they're kind of already asking some of those questions in their head, like, well, who is God really? Like, what is he? Who is he? Who is Jesus? Like, who is this man? Because it's interesting to see how common it is for people in the Middle East and in Lebanon. They'll have dreams of this man in white. And so they start asking these questions, and it's you see it in kids and adults, and it's just really wild how the Lord is meeting them this way, but it opens them up for questions a lot of times and starts to open their hearts. So we're seeing that. And then mainly some of the obstacles would kind of be, it's, Christianity is legal there. It's totally okay for them to convert from any religion to another, but you mainly see local persecution among their neighbors, among local government, and things like that. They just try and make it more difficult for them. So, but
you see that here with relatives, somebody converting from Catholic to Baptist or something.
Exactly.
But I mean, changing whole faiths. I know it's interesting how human beings compartmentalize groups.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So thankfully, though, with the community that's there, they have support. They have people that have already walked through what they're experiencing, and that's been really cool to see. Just them bond together in that time.
One of my favorite stories to tell of one of these young believing families is, they're Kurdish Syrian, so they're rejected by the Syrian. They're rejected by the Lebanese. A lot of Lebanese don't really like the Syrian, and of the Syrians don't like the Kurds. So they're on their own, and they've been chased out of their homes by evil men. They were forced to leave their country. They've lost everything. And they've just given their lives to the Lord. And we had a group from YWAM that was visiting, and we were all having lunch, and one of the people asked this family, and this is a question we ask a lot, like when there's hardships and trials, we often say, how do you hold on to your faith? And that was their question. It's like, through all that you've been through, how do you maintain your faith? How do you still hold on to Jesus? That question didn't compute. It didn't make sense in their minds. They were like, well, he's everything. How could we not? And so that's how pure their faith is. And I think we need to learn from that.
Yeah.
Like, okay, when we go through hardships, the question shouldn't be, how do you hold on? That's, how could you not? Because he really is everything, and he really does take away every burden.
And they've had so many hardships that, like we have to stand in line too long some places. We have to wear a mask when we're talking to people.
Everything is the end of the world, and it's like.
And so that's what in countries, particularly third world countries, where I've been, where you're talking about the faith being so pure, because there's so much cultural Christianity, particularly here in the Bible Belt, and almost to like popular culture. I think Christian worship music is like number 3 or 4 in the Billboard, as far as like but over there and in other countries, I've been like in Africa and stuff. You see, it is everything. Because there's nothing,
There's nothing else they can hold on to.
Exactly. So, how can we pray for you? What do you need us to pray for? And just how can people, whether they're watching this, how can they contact you if they want to? Because I'll say, and I'll put some things at the end of the interview about how they can contact you for supporting you guys and praying for you guys. And
Yeah. The main prayer point right now needs to be for Lebanon.
Mm-hmm.
This is a pivotal moment in Lebanon's history where they've experienced so much loss, so much destruction, and now really the eyes of the world is on are on Lebanon, and there's an opportunity to rebuild the country, and also for the gospel to advance. One of my friends was texting me the other day, and he said, people are running to the church right now. Like people are so open right now, and they need something. And so pray for, when you're praying for Lebanon. One, pray for just for the country itself, that this would be a time to rebuild and really for the country to prosper. And two, that the gospel would advance, because this is the time. This is the time where people are hungry for the Lord.
All right. Well, we'll do that. Well, thank y'all for visiting with me. And, how long you guys home?
So I think we'll head back to Lebanon the very end of September.
Okay,
so we have a little bit more time here.
Yeah.
Of course, you got to divide your time between Georgia and Texas.
It's fun trying to figure all
that out. Yeah. So, but anyway, well, God bless you guys. We love you, and just looking forward to hearing great things.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Jordan and Charlie. That was truly inspiring. I'm going to put up their information about how to contact them, both to pray for them, and also if you feel called to support them. I know that they would appreciate that as well. Again, hope to see you in worship tomorrow, either at 8:30 live at Conyers First or online right here on Facebook and YouTube. And so God bless, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.